Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. Today we have a manga review of chapter 902, End Roll. And in a fairly fitting ending to an arc that was supposed to be centered around Sanji, this chapter very much features him as the focal point for a large majority of it. Starting with the moment where he finds out about Pedro's death, and that actually got me much more than I thought it would. I've never really considered it, but the two of them hardly knew each other. I mean, well, in terms of time, Pedro barely knew any of the Straw Hats, but Sanji in particular must be feeling pretty damn awful right now, because someone who didn't really know him at all sacrificed their life for him. I mean, from Pedro's perspective, it makes sense because Sanji and the others saved his entire tribe, but still, if I were Sanji, I'd be feeling some pretty heavy responsibility right about now. But there was also a very interesting thing said by Pedro in Sanji's short flashback about Inuarashi and Nekomamushi, and how apparently the whole world is waiting for those two. So of course they both sailed with the Roger Pirates and are pretty phenomenally strong in their own right. But this statement from Pedro seems to imply that there's a lot more that the Mink leaders have left to accomplish in the world, and on a pretty big scale as well. Apart from helping to defeat Kaido and opening the borders of Wano, the only thing I can think of is that they are somehow going to be pivotal players in making Luffy the Pirate King. I mean, Pedro wouldn't have specifically known it was Luffy at the time, but the Mink seem to have inherited Roger's will in some way, shape or form, and that is going to make them infinitely more fascinating to watch in the future. But back to Sanji, we also got a good sense of closure between him and Pudding. Well, sort of. As was predicted by just about everybody, she ended up kissing him, which was a really sweet moment actually, especially considering that I still don't like her character. But the one part of this that I loved was the decision to turn an entire page worth of panels into film strips, and really get us absorbed in Pudding's Devil Fruit power. I still think this power was underutilized and a bit random, but this one page here does make fantastic use of it. And the final note on Sanji specifically is the very last page, which just brought a huge smile to my face. I love the juxtaposition of Sanji and Zeph serving the same dish at the same time and saying the exact same line about how they will feed anyone who wishes to eat. And as much as I complained last week about Sanji's cake not having any sort of huge effects, I'm probably going to have to eat those words this week because the cake did exactly what was intended. It fed a hungry person who wished to eat. But I do think that it takes reading this chapter to really appreciate that. In fact, even though Big Mom is a terrifying Yonko and an enemy of the Straw Hats, I feel like Zeph would most certainly be proud of Sanji's actions here. And he really has displayed what it truly means to be a chef. Unfortunately though, that personal victory may come at quite a big cost. Germa, the Sun Pirates, and Jinbei lie in stark contrast to everyone else and are looking like they're practically on the verge of death. The two-page spread featuring all of these characters who acted as a shield for the Straw Hats gives me some really bad vibes. As in the kind of bad vibes that mean this could be the last time we see a lot of these characters. Since it's Oda we're talking about, I still think that most, if not all of them, will make it out of Whole Cake Island alive, especially the Sun Pirates, because if they don't, then having Jinbei stay behind was just pointless. But at the same time, let's not put the possibility of a complete massacre out of the question. I've been saying this for quite a while now, but you cannot just stroll into the territory of a Yonko and expect to leave unscathed. Yeah, we lost Pedro, we lost Pound, we took a whole lot of damage in general, but I still think that's getting away quite lightly. If the future of the series delivers on the terrible feeling I got from this chapter, then I certainly think we can expect to incur more losses. So now let's turn to the sudden nature in which Whole Cake Island appears to have ended. A lot of people aren't thrilled with this ending, and I am personally on the fence about it for the time being. I love the way it wrapped up Sanji's story, but outside of that, this arc doesn't really feel like it's actually ended. And I'm very much hoping that there is a reason for that feeling. I mean, I just can't imagine that after everything that's happened that we are done with the Big Mom Pirates. There's been no actual conclusion as of yet. Yes, the Straw Hats have escaped, but surely Big Mom is going to pursue them. There's also the fact that key figures in her crew were very underdeveloped, like Smoothie, Oven, and Daifuku. These characters feel very much like they have unfinished business in the story, but there are also a couple of other retrospective bits that may hint towards another conflict with the Big Mom Pirates in the future. The first of which is Luffy blatantly declaring that after he beats Kaido, he'll be back to take Big Mom out, and the second is Katakuri's question about whether or not Luffy will return to beat Big Mom. I know this could be written off as Luffy just making bold statements as he does, but I don't think we're done with this Yonko. There's also the little detail of Zeus still being with Nami, which I love, because I think that she will use Zeus wonderfully, although he's unlikely to be as powerful as when Big Mom is using him directly, but he is part of Big Mom's soul, so I imagine that she can use Zeus to track the Straw Hats. So with that in mind, I don't think we will be returning to Whole Cake Island. On the contrary, I believe that this might spark Big Mom and her fleet to set sail in the New World, and possibly clash with another Yonko in the process. I think I've brought this up before in another chapter review, but even with Mako, the Minx, the Samurai, and the Worst Generation members present on Wano, I still don't think it's enough to take down Kaido. However, things would become quite interesting if the Straw Hats pretty much unknowingly baited Big Mom into a conflict with Kaido, and we got to see two emperors clash, creating an opening for the Ninja Pirate Minx Samurai alliance to do some real damage. But getting back to the present, yeah, the ending of this arc does feel a bit unsatisfying, even if last week I did pretty much demand that the arc end as soon as possible. But what annoys me most is purely from a mechanical storytelling perspective, and that is the fact that the Whole Cake Island had so many potential climax points where you could just leap off and end the arc. Like the collapse of Whole Cake Chateau, Luffy's victory against Katakuri, Big Mom eating the cake, etc. There were so many natural points that this arc could have ended, and yet Oda chose to end it on a bit of a flat note, with 3 really weird last chapters. I mean, I loved this chapter, as well as chapter 900, and had some pretty meh feelings about 901, but I'm not convinced that they all work together at all. Each of them go in such separate dramatic directions and imply something entirely different from what's to come after. It's just weird writing, and I really hope that I eat my words in retrospect, but for now, the ending of this arc feels like a roller coaster designed to give you whiplash. But rather sneakily inserted into this week's chapter is a beautiful moment between Katakuri and Brûlé. When we were first introduced to Charlotte Brûlé in the Seducing Woods, I could never have imagined myself caring about this character in any way. But throughout this arc, she's really grown on me, and her flashback here has really sealed the deal in terms of converting me into a Brûlé fan. And of course, Katakuri continues to rise in my ranks of favourite characters, and surely we're pretty much now guaranteed to see him sometime again in the future as an ally. He's completely smitten by the old Straw Hat charm, even if Brûlé isn't. But his part in the flashback was quite touching because it's rare to see antagonists in stories actually being driven by an identifiable motivator. After this chapter, all of a sudden I feel like I completely understand who Katakuri is and why he does what he does in terms of protecting his family. He was just born into a twisted brood, and really he's grown up as quite a reasonable person, all things considering. But moving on, the one thing I really didn't like about this chapter were all the narration boxes with the singing. I think they worked incredibly well for chapter 900 when Big Mom was in her cake-eating state, but here they just kind of annoyed me. It felt like reading them was actively getting in the way of the story, rather than providing any sort of dramatic insight. It might be something that gets conveyed better in the eventual anime adaptation, but for now they're just kind of irritating. So after having spoken about all of the above, this chapter was actually pretty damn great. It's shocking to see just how much story and wonderfully crafted character moments Oda engineered into it without feeling overstuffed. I mean, there were 3 completely unrelated flashbacks featured in this chapter, as well as a hell of a lot of story happening in the present. I can't remember when or if this has ever happened before in the series, so all I can really say is job well done, Oda. And that pretty much does it for chapter 902. If you enjoyed this video, then please feel free to like, favorite, or subscribe, and please do comment with your thoughts on the chapter. This has been the Grand Line Review, and I'll see you next time.